Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the local review body of 9th of September 2021. I can confirm that the meeting is held and is quorate. Can I please firstly ask members to appoint a chair for the meeting?
Can I nominate Jim Dempster?
I'll second that.
You'll need to check there's no other nominations, Claire.
Okay. No other nominations. Councillor Dempster, are you willing to accept the role of chair?
Yes, indeed, aye. Good morning, members, and welcome to all parties that are joining us today. Can I ask Claire to confirm sediment, please, and any declarations of interest? And after that, Claire, can you please take us through the documents and papers required for this first application?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We've got 5 members present this morning, all present via MS Teams.
Thanks, Claire. Have we sediment and so obviously no apologies. Can you take us declarations of interest, please, members?
Yes, I have one, Jim. Is with the first case. The applicant's sister is a friend of my partner's. I've got no direct contact with the applicant. I've never met her, and her sister, I would only recognise her or say hello in the passing. So I don't think I need to stand down from it. Thank you.
That's very kind for that, Ian. Thank you. Any other declarations?
No, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, members. In that case, Claire, can you take the review body through the documents and papers for the meetings, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm there's 2 notices of review for consideration today. First being item 4, Low Barley, Gatehouse of Fleet, refusal of planning permission for change of use of agricultural buildings to form 2 dwelling houses, alterations and extensions, formation of car parking and turning area, and installation of 2 septic tanks and soakaway systems. 2014-89 full. You have the usual papers in your sets of papers being notice of review, report of handling, the observation of the appointed officer and the applicant's agent, comments of the applicant's agent on the observations of the appointed officer, the relevant planning application forms, the decision letter of Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts of the LDP2, and also the photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are on pages 225 to 226 of your papers. 1, it has not been satisfactorily demonstrated that the proposed buildings are capable of redevelopment without substantial demolition and rebuilding, which would be contrary to the terms of the guidance within LDP2 supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside at section 7 and the LDP2 supplementary guidance conversion of traditional buildings at section 2, which both relate directly to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 Policy H3. The requested method of determination is that the applicant has requested that the review be dealt with as a basis of the assessment of these review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review are, in summary, the proposed development is for the conversion of 2 existing agricultural buildings to provide a new home in each building. It is agreed between the appellant and the planning authority that the existing buildings are traditional and that conversion represents an opportunity to secure the future of both buildings. Professional advice has been obtained from Marsh and Riddle, who holds professional indemnity insurance to advise on the structural integrity of the buildings, which identifies that both buildings are structurally intact and capable of the conversion included within the proposed development. It is considered that the works identified in the structural condition report, installation of a new beam beneath the ridge of the roof, cannot reasonably be understood as extensive or substantial rebuilding. Therefore, the proposal is considered to represent the conversion of traditional buildings in the countryside to new houses and be acceptable in accordance with Policy H3. 2, vehicle access is proposed via an existing opening to the public road adjacent to the east. A consultation response was received from the roads planning officer who did not object to the proposal. And 3, the applicant does not seek special treatment or accommodation and is prepared to accept conditions recommended in the consultation responses of the council officers and partners. A condition precluding demolition and rebuilding of existing buildings is considered to be acceptable. You've got all references to the relevant development plan policies, LDP2, OP1, OP2, H3, HE3, NE2, IN8, IN9, IN10, and the supplementary guidance for design quality and placemaking, housing in the countryside, conversion of traditional buildings, and the historic built environment. Other material considerations are Scottish Planning Policy, June 2014. So the main issues the LRV may wish to consider are: does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan in principle? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 policy H3 in principle? Does the proposal accord with the guidance set out in the adopted LDP2 supplementary guidance relating to housing in the countryside, section 7? Does the proposal accord with the guidance set out in the adopted LPT2 supplementary guidance relating to the conversion of traditional buildings? Specifically, has it been satisfactorily demonstrated that the proposed new dwelling houses are capable of being formed without the substantial demolition and rebuilding of the affected buildings? If it is not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there any set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development? If so, what reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? And if members are minded not to uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? And if members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to the specific reasoning of the decision would be required? So, having outlined the documents, it falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It's confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. You have the following options available. You can decide you have sufficient information before you to determine the review today. Request further information in the form of written representations. The LRB would be required to state precisely the information it is seeking and who would provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, specifically who would be invited to speak and on what matters, or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, and this can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would not obviously allow a decision to be made today. If the local review body resolves it has sufficient information and no further procedure is required, then the LRB has the full powers to uphold, vary or reverse a determination. The decision notice would include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority had decided the case reviewed. For both cases today, you have a planning advisor present at your meeting. It's confirmed they have not had any involvement in these cases and were not the case officer or the appointed officer for these applications. They are here purely to provide independent advice on matters of planning policy law or process of the LRB. You also have a solicitor present today who will act independently if the LRB require any specific advice on matters of law. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the Chair now to lead the debate and in the first instance lead the local review body through the agenda papers together to decide if it has sufficient information before it to make a determination today.
Thanks very much, Claire. I'm looking for one bit of clarification, please. In the request for a review, the applicant or the applicant's agent said there was no further information supplied. However, I did receive an email with a document attached from the applicant's agent a week ago. I forwarded it to Robert Duncan on the assumption that David Sutty is still not at work and not available for advice. And the response I received was it appeared to be new information. We are reviewing an officer's decision, so I'm concerned that this is new information, and if it is, whether or no the members can choose to take account of that, or whether we need to discount it. If it's simply a renewal of the information in the papers, members will all have read them, so we don't need to concern ourselves. But if it's new, and I imagine all members would have received the same correspondence, although my email was sent to me only. So advice on that, please. Is this new information? And I don't know whether Billy has any insight on that, but I sent it to Robert Duncan, and clearly Robert Duncan may have been involved signing off the document, so he may not be present today. But advice would be helpful, please, on the receipt of a document a week ago that would suggest it was new information. Claire or Laura?
Chair, it's Billy.
Right, Billy, come in, please.
I think this is a procedural matter rather than a planning matter, but I would confirm that this appears to be a document that was not before the planning authority when the application was determined. So it wasn't before the case officer or the appointed officer when the delegated decision was made. But I think it's actually for Laura to advise on this procedural matter.
Thanks, Billy. Laura, it would appear we've not had that document or our officer, and we're not here as a planning applications committee today. We're here to review a decision that our case officer made based on the information that was available to the case officer at the time. So what's your advice?
Thank you, Chair. I had the benefit of seeing this document in advance, and the advice that I had provided to Robert Duncan was that this document does not form part of the review documents. The term review documents is what is used in Regulation 12, where it says, where the local review body consider that the review documents provide sufficient information to enable them to determine the review, they may determine the review without further procedure. Now, the review documents is defined earlier on in the regulations, and it does not include this document which has been lodged later. If the local review body felt that they could not determine this matter without considering this document, that would require further procedure. In this situation, it would be a written submission, and you would have to follow the procedure set out in Regulation 15, requesting that the document is formally lodged with us, and thereafter follow the procedure in Regulation 15.
Thank you. And on that basis, there would not be a determination today.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. You should not consider that document today because it was not part of the initial review documents.
Thank you. And I personally haven't read it. I don't know whether other members received it or whether they did not, and it's not really for my reason to ask that. So I will certainly not take account of that document, and on that basis we'll proceed. Thanks very much, both Billy and Laura, for that advice. Okay, members. So we now progress to the consideration of the first notice of review. Are members willing to decide simply on the information to hand, or should we go through every section first and decide what? That'd be my preference, obviously. So we consider the notice of review documents, page 13 to 34, etc., and thereafter we can summarise our thoughts. Does that seem a reasonable approach, members?
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Okay, members, then the first consideration is a notice of review and related documents, pages 13 to 34. Does any member have any questions on that section of the document? I'll wait a few minutes and just take a silence as no. And obviously you can call me back at any stage if I progress too swiftly. Second section is report on handling and related correspondence, pages 35 to 82. Are there any questions for the case officer in that section? Would appear not. Section 3, observation for the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, pages 83 to 86. It would appear not. The comment of applicant's agent On observations of the appointed officer, pages 87 to 90. Apparently not. Section 5, planning application forms submitted on 3rd of September 2020, associated plans and supporting information, pages 91 to 220. No questions on that. We move on to section 6, decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 10th of March 2021, pages 221 to 229. No questions on that. Section 7, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, pages 231 to 239. No questions on that. And finally, photos of application site and the locality, pages 241 to 244. And there are no questions on that either. So the grounds of refusal, Claire's already informed us what these grounds are. They're set out in section 1 in page 2 of your handout or papers. It has not been satisfactorily demonstrated that the proposed buildings are capable of redevelopment without substantial demolition and rebuilding, which would be contrary to the terms of guidance within the LDP2, supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside at section 7, and the LDP2 supplementary guidance on conversion of traditional buildings at section 2, which both relate directly to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, LDP2 Policy H3. And the applicant has asked that the review is dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. So as far as the applicant is concerned, the applicant's content that we determine this request, this local review of the review documents on the information provided to us and contained within the papers you have before you. So members, I am in your hands as how to proceed. Do we have sufficient information to allow us to determine the application today? If not, then we have a few decisions to make. If we do not have information to allow us to decide today, we must request further information in the form of written representations, which might include the document that I've certainly received that is not before members, though that would clearly change the complexion of any decision based on the officer's decision, because the officer, when the officer made the decision to refuse, they did not have the document before them that we, or I certainly, have received. We can resolve to hold a site visit, or if the local review body resolves that as sufficient information that no further procedure required, then we have the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case review. We have a planning advisor and Billy with us if we need any further advice or guidance. But remember, Billy is not assisting us in a determination. He's in an advisory capacity only. Councillor Drysdale, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in. I have read the reports, and I know we cannot consider those reports as part of our decision today. And legally, I'd probably need to ask Claire Rogerson or Laura Whitelaw as to does the constituent have another opportunity to re-present with the additional documents we might need to make that planning decision, because it appears that these documents were not available for the planning department at that time of submission, and that could be an error on their behalf. So it's just legally where we stand with that, Chair. Does the constituent have another chance to resubmit, or do we decide that as a committee today? Thanks.
I will ask governance, but my view is that applicants have always the opportunity to represent with new information. They simply consider the advice of planning officers and then the review as they see fit. However, governance first. Claire, please, can you assist Pauline in her question? Does this applicant have the opportunity to represent? And Billy might be able to tell us whether or no there would be a cost, whether or not this is an initial one or a representation. Laura, and it's not about this document at present, it's simply advice on whether or no the applicant in the future can represent should we support the case officer at this review. Come in, Laura, please.
Thank you, Chair. If the review body decided to uphold the decision to refuse this, then the applicant would have to apply afresh, and at that time they could produce what further information they wished. If it is felt that you wish to give the applicant an opportunity to properly lodge the further information which they sent Councillor Dempster, which may provide further information on the reason for refusal by the case officer, then I would suggest the correct procedure would be under Regulation 15 to use to request written submissions, which would then allow the applicant to properly provide this report to you and for the review body to meet again and to consider whether or not they wish to uphold or refuse.
Thank you, Laura. And just for my peace of mind, does that then remove the case officer, or does the case officer have the opportunity to look at the document and reconsider whatever recommendation the case officer may want to make, or is this simply a procedural matter for the review body only?
Regulation 15 sets out that the procedure to follow, the review body will send out a notice to the applicant stating to them what further information they wish. And then there's a set time period for them to provide that. And then within so many days, other people have an opportunity to comment on it. Now, as members will be aware, in the next item that you're going to consider, there has been a change of policy since the initial decision was made by that officer. And as a result of that, suggestions are made. I would anticipate that if it is felt that the further information that is produced alters the initial decision of the case officer, then that is something that the planning authority would be able to comment upon and advise the local review body on.
That's really helpful, Laura. And the other thing, of course, is, and I'm sure I'm correct in saying this, if we decide to request further information, it will have to be the same 5 members that convene again to complete the determination. Is that right? Or can 5 new members start the process afresh?
I would say it would be the same as in a site visit, in that the people who attend should be the same ones that then make the decision. It would be the same here. We had a situation earlier on this morning where we had a reconvened meeting from February, and it was the same 5 members who'd considered the case in February and the members who had then gone out to the site visit.
Thank you. I notice Ian Blake looking to speak, but before Ian comes in, Billy Murray wants to offer some advice, as does Claire Rogerson. So I'll have Billy first, please, and then Claire, and then Ian, with your indulgence, I'll come to you last. It may help you in whatever you might want to offer to the committee. Billy, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just for clarification on the alternative approach, which would be to submit another planning application. You touched on this yourself a moment ago. I can confirm that they would have the opportunity to submit a new application. There would be no application fee if that application was submitted within 12 months of the date of the refusal notice. There would, if required, be a neighbour notification advertisement fee, which would be £30. So there'll be no application fee within 12 months of the date of refusal. There may be a neighbour notification fee of £30, and they would be able to support that application with whatever supporting information they saw fit at that time. So in other words, they could introduce any new information they saw fit. Thank you.
That's really helpful, Billy. Thank you. Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, it would be the same members. It would essentially be in the same meeting. You'd be reconvening following the further procedure of written submissions if that was the case.
Thank you. Ian Blake, I take it we've had quite helpful advice from legal and governance, as well as the case officer or the planning officer who's assisting us with advice today. So whether we reject this today, should we reject this, support the case officer today, there will be no fee other than an advertisement fee should the applicant wish to reapply. So that's one option. The other option is the proposal that Pauline has placed before us, that we might want to simply request further information and defer this meeting for a further date to allow that information to be shared amongst officers and legal, and then reconvene, and we would get guidance at that time from the case officer in any case. So it's really in members' hands how we wish to proceed. So Ian, please.
Yeah, I've forgotten what I was going to say now. No, Chairman, the email that you spoke about, I have actually no recollection of receiving it. I may have missed it, but I certainly don't recall seeing it, so I haven't read it. Reading the report itself, it seems to be down to an interpretation of what a substantial rebuild is, and if it makes any reference to that, I think it may be helpful. I would suggest, I think it's probably an unusual step for us, but I think we should request further information and that this comes forward. We're looking at this case really afresh again, and I think it's important that we get the fullest information. So I would certainly support that. I would, if Pauline's proposed that, I'll certainly second it, or vice versa. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure it's no difference to members, but I did not read the attachment. I sent it on the basis that I didn't want to compromise myself by reading and then using that information to consider the case when the officer didn't already have it. Henry, come in, please. Henry McClelland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I'm very similar-minded to Ian and Pauline, but I would like to state, though, I did receive the email, but like you, Chair, I didn't read the attachment because I thought if I read the attachment, it might inadvertently influence my decision. So I really would support going along with the Regulation 15, which would request this additional information to be formally provided to the local review body, and in doing so, as Laura indicated, it would also give the planning officer and others opportunity to comment.
That's great, Henry. Say great minds think alike. I felt too it's best not to read it in case my opinion was sort of compromised in some way. Councillor Lever, Jeff, please.
Yeah, I also received the email, but I would go along with the proposed action in respect of receiving further information from the applicant.
Okay, Jeff, that seems to be consensus. Bill, is yours a legacy hand, or do you want to come back in?
Oh, sorry, Chair, it's a legacy hand.
Okay, then it seems that it's the opinion of all members of the committee that they would wish the information that was circulated privately to every member to be made available to council officers and to the local review body, in order that we can get proper advice from the case officer on their opinion on the basis of the information, and that we want that to be presented formally to the committee. Before I ask Claire to summarise, are there any other matters members might wish to have put in place, or mechanisms put in place? We're not structural engineers, so if we convene a site visit, it would be for information only, not to decide whether or no the building needs reconstruction. If we want other information apart from the information that was circulated, please lodge that request now. And if not, we will satisfy ourselves that the only additional information we require is the information that was circulated privately to be put on committee papers, and that officers have the opportunity to review that information and reconsider the recommendation or their already made decision. Members, if I do not hear a response, I will take it that the only thing we require and we will most definitely determine this at the next convened meeting on the information we have before us, plus the information that was circulated privately to each committee member. If I don't have any response, I will take it that's a decision of the local review body today, and I will ask Claire to clarify that decision, please, and inform the applicant and agent of our decision and what we require. Claire, can you confirm the decision of the committee today, please? And also, between you and Laura, can you advise members, just for our peace of mind only, what the next steps are? Claire, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the LRB are basically agreeing to adjourn this item to allow for a further procedure of a written submission. This would allow the information that was circulated privately by the applicant to be formally provided to the LRB for the necessary procedures of the advice from planning as required. And following receipt of the written submission, your independent planning advisor can probably provide more detail on what follows once that's received and who gets to see it. But once that process is complete, then the LRB would be reconvened with that information before them.
That's perfect, Claire. Laura, are you satisfied with that process?
Yes, absolutely, Chair.
Thank you. And members, we will not look for any additional information. When we next convene, we will determine the appeal. Ian Blake, please.
Yeah, it's just as it's the five of us that will be considering this again, I would just suggest that we keep the papers and not get them republished other than the additional information.
That's a very sound suggestion, because especially the information provided by the applicant in the first one, it's particularly comprehensive, so that's a helpful suggestion. The only thing is we'll have to be sure that we do get the other papers in time to make sure we have the opportunity to scrutinise them in detail. I'm sure, Claire, that's something you'll be able to ensure. So if members are happy and if legal and governance are content that we retain the papers for in a private location, safe for the next meeting, that's fine, and that we will only receive the additional requested papers and that being hard copy, please. Is that acceptable, Claire?
Yes, certainly, and of course the arrangements wouldn't be made to reconvene this meeting till we were certain that all members had adequate sight of the additional information.
And that we will have the further advice from the case officer, whether that be in support or retaining the position they have taken currently. I think that would be helpful as well, Claire. So make sure that information is available to members before we convene, but I'm sure that'll be a procedural thing anyway. So that concludes that particular item on our agenda. Members, we have deferred this review or case review for further information. Thanks very much, members. Claire, can we now move on to agenda item 2, please? Okay. Or do we just simply proceed again, given that we've already gone through the process at the start of the meeting?
I can give you a short summary of this item if you wish, Chair. I won't repeat the procedures available. So the second item on this agenda is item 5, Busaran Street, Castle Street, Lochmaben, refusal of planning permission for change of use of public house to flatted dwelling house, 210131 FUL. In your papers you have the notice of review, the report on handling, observation of the appointed officer and the applicant's agent's notice of review, the comments of the applicant's agent on the observations of the appointed officer, planning application form, decision notice, relevant extracts of LDP2, the photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal in this case are the proposal would represent the loss of a commercial facility as defined in LDP2. The public house has not been marketed for a period of 12 months in order to demonstrate that despite marketing the site for at least 12 months, there has been no viable interest from other commercial operators. The proposal is therefore contrary to the policy of the Council as stated in LDP2 Policy CF1. The requested method of determination is an assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure. And the grounds stated in the notice of review are in summary, whilst the applicant has not marketed the property through the means of a formal report, he has received no interest in leasing the public house when previously there was a good level of interest in leasing public houses in Lochmaben. 2. The commercial viability within Lochmaben is limited, but the demand for housing is strong, and it is felt that the additional housing would have greater community benefit than a vacant public house. The design is sympathetic to the area and surrounding properties. The proposals would be positive development of the site, and the design is in keeping with surrounding properties in terms of orientation, streetscape, finishes, building use and size. You have all the relevant LDP local development plan policies, OP1, OP2, H1, CF1, IN9, T2, ED5, HE2, HE4, and supplementary guidance, design quality and placemaking. Other material considerations are the LDP2 planning guidance, assessing the adequacy of marketing for change of use applications, November 2019. The main issues that the LRB may wish to consider, given the change in material circumstances set out in the appointed officer's comments, which is on page 285 of your papers, are members satisfied that this decision can now be overturned as a departure from the terms of the development plan? If so, what set of conditions and reasons would be required? And again, you have the same options on procedure available to you as outlined previously. So I'll ask the Chair to lead you through the item.
Thanks very much, Claire. I note that Pauline has asked she leave for a few minutes, so I think it might be useful to have a comfort break just to ensure that Pauline can participate in this decision making. She did say that she had to go and, well, she alerted members before the commencement of the meeting that she would have to answer the door to collect an item at one stage. She said she would only be a few minutes. So your indulgence, members, we will just give Pauline a few minutes to see if she returns. If not, we will commence in her absence, but I'm sure it will be a very brief interlude. So just have a comfort break, members, for a couple of minutes. move on to this second item, and there is a reference to change in material circumstances on page 5 on the additional papers, but I think we'll go through the procedure that will ensure we don't have to revert back to a later date, and then we'll deal with the particular issue raised, which is page 285 on our committee papers, not the additional information circulated later by our staff. So, item 5, Bruce Arms, 3 Castle Street, Lochmaben, refusal of planning permission for change of use of public house to flatted dwelling house. We have the notice of review and related documents, page 249 to 259. Are there any questions on that? Seems not. Report on handling and related correspondence, pages 261 to 282. No. 3 observations with appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, pages 283 through to 285. 283 to 285. No. 4, the comments of applicant's agent on observations with appointed officer, pages 287 to 289. No. Planning application form submitted on 21st of January 2021, associated plans and supporting information, pages 291 to 313. No. Decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 19th of April 2021, pages 315 to 321. No. 7, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, pages 323 to 333. And contained in the papers, photos of application site and the locality, pages 335 to 338. Proposal would represent the loss of a commercial facility as defined in LDP 2. Public house has not been marketed for a period of 12 months in order to demonstrate that, despite marketing the site for at least 12 months, there has been no viable interest from other commercial operators. The proposal is therefore contrary to the policy of the council as stated in LDP 2 policy CF1. The applicant has asked that the review be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. And then we have the option available to the local review body today is that it can decide it's sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations, resolve to hold a hearing again specifying who will be invited to speak and what matters, resolve to hold a site visit accompanied or unaccompanied, and if we resolve that there is sufficient information and that no further procedure is required from the local review body, has the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case review. And now, members, we have a report from Robert Duncan that provides us with very clear direction in what we have the opportunity to do and the basis on why that should be done. And it's always the case that we are asked to ensure that any conditions we place are fair and reasonable on an applicant's request for planning permission. We can't market, or the applicant can't market the property because we have put a stop on any marketing. Therefore, the applicant cannot comply with the conditions that would be required in normal circumstances. On that basis, we have an opportunity to vary the officer's recommendation based on new information. Any members have any thoughts on the document on page 285 and how that might reflect on your determination or your view of the case officer's decision? Councillor Lever, Jeff? You may be muted, Jeff.
You're right. Yeah, I think the information given on page 285 by the appointed officer makes it very clear what we should do and the grounds for it, and that is to overturn the decision.
Okay. Any other member? Councillor McClelland Henry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm the same opinion as Councillor Lever, and if that's a proposal, I would second that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Blake. Ian.
Yeah, the same for me, thanks.
Thank you. And Pauline.
I'm in agreement as well, Chair. Thank you.
It would seem then that it would be a unanimous decision of this committee. I'll just check with Claire and Billy. It's the decision to overturn the case officer's refusal is on the basis that we can no longer ask the applicant to comply with the conditions that would normally have been in place. Does that sound appropriate terminology, Billy, before I go to Claire and then Laura?
No, Chair, I don't think it is absolutely accurate. It's not a case of a question of conditions. The crux of the matter is that in terms of LDP2 policy CF1, there is a requirement for a marketing report to demonstrate, as has been reiterated here, that the property has been marketed for a period of 12 months. As a result of a decision by the Economy and Resources Committee on the 15th of June, that committee decided to suspend that requirement for a temporary period of 6 months. So therefore, on that basis, the appointed officer has advised you that decision by the Economy and Resources Committee represents a material consideration of sufficient weight to override the current policy consideration. The policy itself does not change as a result of that. What he's saying is that this is a material consideration of sufficient weight to override that policy in this instance. So I don't think you have to concern yourself with conditions or conditions requesting a marketing report, because that wouldn't come into play if you decided here today to overturn the decision and therefore approve this application. There are no recommended conditions in terms of any consultees, so it would appear to be an unconditional approval unless the local review body decided they wanted to apply any conditions. I would also advise that, as I understand it, this application is retrospective, so therefore there would be no standard time directive. In other words, a time limit on the commencement of the permission.
Thanks very much, Billy. That's very helpful technical advice. Ian, is your hand up a legacy one, or do you want to come back in?
No, legacy, sorry.
Okay, I presume then that notwithstanding the useful and professional advice Billy has given us, that members are still minded to approve this application on the basis that it has a significant weight and outweighs and overrides the elements LDP2, and in present circumstances the application should be granted permission. On that basis, I'll ask Claire and then Laura if that's a competent decision by the committee, and if so, that will be endorsed. Claire first and then Laura, please.
Yes, Chair, that would be a competent decision, that basically you would be reversing the decision of the appointed officer to grant planning permission on the basis of the decision taken at Economy and Resources Committee on the 15th of June 2021, which effectively suspends the requirement of CF1 to market commercial community facilities for a temporary period of 6 months.
Thank you, Claire. And members, you are aware that if we grant this, that without conditions, that will simply be the end of the matter. The applicant will have absolute right to progress or to continue with the development with no conditions. I'll give members just a minute to reflect on that. I'm not suggesting you should apply any. What I'm saying is, unless you do, this will be a carte blanche for the applicant to progress with his development. Laura, any further advice for members? Claire's been quite clear that this is a legitimate decision of the committee.
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you. And Billy, I see you're wanting to offer us some further advice.
Yes, just a further point of clarification, Chair. You used the term carte blanche to carry out the development as you saw fit, in accordance with the submitted details as part of the application. So, you know, everything that has been submitted under the application applies. He has to, in other words, the windows and the details and things like that, where there are alterations, he has to comply with that. It's just not a complete open-ended decision. It just means that there are no planning conditions. They still have to comply with the details submitted.
So that might well feature in a decision if we make it today. Well, we have made it today that although we have overturned the case officer's decision, the applicant will still be required to comply with the conditions as set out in the application. Is that what you're saying?
No, not conditions. The details submitted. In other words, any drawings or any
Right, yes.
supporting information or whatever.
That's very helpful, Billy, because that keeps us on track and doesn't allow us to make any mistakes in terms of the decision we make. So if members don't want to change the view they have taken, I will ask Claire, using Billy's phraseology, just to remind members what we've decided to do, overturn the decision of the case officer, but there's still a requirement to comply with the design drawing detail as submitted in the original application. Is that right, Billy?
Yes, that would be correct. It's a standard part of every decision notice, words to the effect of planning permission is granted in accordance with the details submitted, etc., etc. And that's a standard part of every decision notice, and then there are conditions. It's just that in this case, you wouldn't be imposing any conditions.
Okay, thanks very much, Billy. Claire, you'll have grasped that. So you can just confirm the decision of the committee today, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, well, in accordance then with the details submitted in the planning application, the LRB are agreeing to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and grant the planning permission as they agree that the decision taken by Economy and Resources on the 15th of June 2021 basically suspends the requirement of CF1 to market the commercial community facilities for a period of 6 months.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Members, thank you for your indulgence today. Thank you for your input. I look forward to seeing you again sometime in the near future to completely finish the first notice of review. Pauline, did you want to come in?
I did. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just having a problem raising my hand today on this computer. Can I just check with yourself, Chair, if I can go through Billy to find out in the future, once this 6-month period in Economy and Resources might finish with regards to COVID and other reasons, that we, the whole planning committee, can be kept abreast as to that information. If things change, Billy, that would be helpful. Thank you, Chair. If that makes sense.
Thanks, Pauline. We probably can't look into the future, but again, it's down to case officers because they make the determination of whether or no marketing takes place. No, the planning committee. We simply, as always, take best advice from our officers and then deal with that accordingly. Billy, can you help Pauline, please?
Yes, it wouldn't be through me in this instance because I'm an independent planning advisor in this scenario. So if you wanted an update on what was happening, it would be a case of either the case officer for the application or the appointed officer, and the appointed officer would be Robert.
Thanks, Billy. I don't think it's so much an update on this application. That's been dealt with. I think, Pauline, about future applications, that would fall to the case officer to inform the committee rather than the committee advising the case officer what to do.
I would suggest it's probably something that should be referred to the appointed officer. In other words, Robert Duncan, the team leader. In terms of the general point, the Economy and Resources Committee decision, not the application as such.
Thanks, Billy. No, I think Laura's wanting to come in just to help us, but I'm sure that's the case, that it's the case officer that determines when a marketing requirement is placed on an application. That'll be for them to determine at the time of the application being submitted. Laura, did you want to help us with that?
Yes, it was just to say that it was the decision of the Economy and Resources Committee on the 15th of June 2021 that said there would be this 6-month moratorium on the 12-month marketing requirement. So it would be whatever committee that was nearest to the 6 months on from the 15th of June that I would imagine there'd be a report back on it or further consideration of it if it was required to be extended.
Aye, and I take it case officers, I think Pauline's more concerned about what happens in the future if another application like this comes in and there's a moratorium. Is it just simply ignored, or do we somehow make sure that marketing's carried out? Because I can just see a situation where everybody will apply the now for a change of use, and if they can't be marketed, there's an automatic assumption that we've now set a precedent per se.
Well, once the 6-month period is up, I would have to look at the report to see whether or not it was said that it would automatically come back in, or whether it was going back to committee to consider whether or not it was coming back in or being continued. But I would anticipate that the members of the Planning Authority would be advised as to whether or not that moratorium was still in place.
Yeah. Thanks, Lassie. Thanks, Henry. If you're still there, thanks for seeing you today. I'll catch up with you soon. No, that's fine. Obviously, it's not for us, Laura. Just if it had helped Pauline at this moment in time, that'd have been useful. But anyway, Billy, thanks very much for being here. Claire, thanks very much. Thanks, members. I have asked Laura just to give me 2 minutes of valuable time, and then I'll let her go as well. So thanks for being here, members. We'll catch you again soon.
Hold on.